So my name is Faiz, and I'm currently in Bali. And I went to a three-dimensional unconference in person here in Bali, which is my first one a couple of months ago. And I really enjoyed the format. And what I particularly liked, got kind of thrown in the deep end and into leading a session at that one. And I like the informality of it and the possibility of just having a conversation and a dialogue with people and using conversation for learning. So I was hoping that that would be the format of this session. So I have no presentation, I have no slideshow. At the moment, I'm looking at a screen with some grey avatars and a few photos of people from around the world. So do feel free to turn your cameras on if you'd like. And I'm just going to sort of present an idea that's been rolling around in my head for a few years. And yeah, I'd love that to be a conversation. It's certainly not, I'm not presenting a solution as such, although solutions may come out of it. But yeah, as I said, I'm interested in exploring topics through conversation and learning from conversation and putting something in the middle and then seeing what we can do with it and where it goes from there. And so depending on, yeah, whether it's just me talking on my own or we get into some kind of conversation and dialogue, we'll see how long that goes on for. And then in the second half of the session, I thought we could do a kind of interactive, experiential, practical part. And we'll do some pranayama, some 1 or 2 breathing exercises as a kind of a real world example of the kind of things that I will be talking about in the first half. So if you've just joined, I was just saying that yeah, I would love this to be a conversation rather than a presentation. So I've got a few ideas that I'm just going to put into the room, and I can probably talk about them for a very long time because they've been in my head for a few years. But yeah, I'd love any questions at any point. If somebody's not clear, or you have a comment, or you disagree with something, or you'd like to add something, then please do jump in at any point. That would be great. And I've got all of I've been gallery view, so I can see you if you do want to jump in and say anything. And I think it will automatically switch anyway. So I've called this talk Seeking Salutogenesis, and I often get told to not use big difficult words, but I kind of like them because they intrigue interesting people. Salutogenesis is not a word. I don't even actually know if it's a real word. It was a word that I first heard studying a master's in ecological design thinking from my professor who ran the course. And salutogenesis is the opposite of pathogenesis. So his argument was that we live in a pathogenic society, a society that's born out of sickness. Everything emanates out of sickness. Our focus is on fighting sickness. So whether that's literal sickness and illness, or whether that's the kind of problem-solving mindset that we have. So we live in a fundamentally sick society, and we put a lot of attention. And so that kind of perpetuates, and we keep putting attention into trying to fix that. Whereas the opposite would be a salutogenic society. So arising out of health, out of wellness. And that can again be specifically in terms of health and well-being, which is sort of the starting point that I'm starting with today, but it can certainly be extrapolated out into across the board into what would a salutogenic society look like across the board. And in some ways it's using a different word for ideas that people have already been exploring. for many years and many decades, but I just particularly like the word, and I like its all-encompassing nature. So in relation to health, and it's interesting doing this, and obviously kind of part of the reason that I was spurred on, but obviously there's a health crisis happening around us and around the world at the moment, and a lot of focus on healthcare systems. But we don't really have healthcare systems. We have sick care systems. We have systems in place that are there to take care of the sick. They're not systems in place that are there promoting health. And again, across the board, not many of the systems that we currently have in place, the dominant systems, promote health or promote well-being. A lot of them seem to perpetuate sickness, and we're starting to realize that now. So there is this growing movement, this growing attention to well-being, personal well-being, and collective well-being. But it's not it's kind of an undercurrent, and the undercurrent can and will grow. And I just think having this all-encompassing umbrella can kind of help lift it up. It's like, this is what we are currently doing, this is what we want to be doing. So we have sick care systems rather than healthcare systems. And many of those systems were designed to treat the sick. So they were meant to treat acute conditions. And what they've ended up doing is, over recent years and recent decades, is they've become, they spend a lot of time dealing with chronic conditions. So people with chronic conditions, and often these conditions are preventable conditions, end up taking up a lot of time and energy and resources of the healthcare systems. And so our healthcare systems become overwhelmed because they're no longer just dealing with acute sicknesses and injuries and these kinds of things. And so I don't know the exact statistics, but I know that I think it's about 70 million people a year die of heart disease. And that's the people who die. So yeah, dealing with things like heart disease, diabetes, it takes a huge toll on the healthcare system. And so what we're seeing in many places now is, when there is a large-scale acute health crisis, systems very quickly become overrun. And many of them were probably already overrun, close to bursting. It's the kind of information that we don't currently have. And so we're really seeing it playing out in front of us, is how the systems that we've developed are not capable of dealing with acute health crises, because they're already dealing with chronic health crises. And so again, there is a movement to addressing some of these chronic health crises, but it just seems to me to still be focused. The focus seems to be in the wrong place. The attention is in the wrong place. And it's this idea of pushing against something, or being pulled towards something, that I've been exploring and playing with. So when you see something that you don't like or you don't want, and you push against it, there's this kind of resistive force. And it's hard work. Whereas if you focus your attention on what you do want, there's more of a pulling, attractive force that pulls you towards it. So we're still focused on solving the chronic health problems, rather than creating healthful scenario, creating scenarios of well-being and health. And for me, it feels like a subtle but important shift in the mindset and the way that we approach these things, in the perspective. And what I've found interesting with the current health crisis that we have, with the virus and the pandemic, is that many of the people who've been most affected already had comorbidities and chronic health problems, so ongoing severe chronic health problems. And then there's all sorts of interesting things in the way the virus works and the biochemistry of the virus and of the patients, as to the way that it works in people with existing conditions like heart disease and like diabetes. So in a salutogenic society, a society which was focused on health and well-being, where where the well-being of the population was really a priority, the situation that we have now would be nothing like what it's currently playing out like, based on the evidence that we're seeing. Because if you had a society where there was, if our society had far less people with heart disease, with obesity, with diabetes, then the evidence suggests that the number of deaths from the virus would be a lot lower than they currently are. So on all counts, a salutogenic society reduces the load on the healthcare systems and allows them to be healthcare systems rather than sick care systems and chronic sickness care systems. And then also when you are faced with some kind of extraordinary scenario, extraordinary circumstances, like an epidemic, like a virus outbreak, like whatever kind of outbreak, your population is more resilient. So a salutogenic society has resilience built into it, built into the health of the individuals. And I think there's also something in it for me about, you could call it personal responsibility, you could call it empowerment. I find the idea of promoting health and well-being empowering for individuals, but there is also an element of personal responsibility, how much personal responsibility we take for our health and our well-being, and how much of it we hand over to other people, to external agents. And just as I was preparing to start, just a thought that came to my head was this kind of, the healthcare system as it's set up provides a kind of safety net for people to let go of some of that personal responsibility. And so what I'm hoping is, as the data and evidence from the current upheaval comes out, the lesson that people will take is taking personal responsibility for your health and your well-being is even more beneficial than it might have seemed before. Just in terms of, that resilience and that empowerment. That's my initial splurge. Does anyone have anything to say, comment, suggest, ask, anything at this point? About 15 minutes in. No, so I'll keep going to some extent. So I'll just say a little bit more, and then we'll go into, as I said, a bit of a practical thing. So this is kind of the segue into that. So from what I've just said and into a bit of a practice. And this idea of empowering individuals, I'm interested in how, obviously the collective is made up of individuals, so how individual well-being relates to collective well-being. And again, if each person is taking responsibility for their own health and well-being as much as they can, then that benefits the collective. So there's currently, in the UK particularly, but I'm sure in other places in the world, this kind of collective, this notion of collective care, so caring for the healthcare system and the healthcare workers, and caring for each other, by not going out and by not doing this and by doing this. But within that, and within the whole narrative so far, there's very little about information about boosting immune systems, and very little, there isn't that link between, if I take care of my immune system, and I help other people around me in my immediate circle to do the same, then I am doing my bit to take care of the collective. So if each person is doing what they can, then the health of the collective is improved as a result. And one of the ways that I've been exploring to do that is through the use of the breath and breath work, which in yoga practice is called pranayama, and it's growing in popularity and becoming quite well known. And the more I dive into exploring the breath and breathwork practices, and start to understand some of the science behind it and some of the physiology behind it and the psychology behind it, more and more it reveals itself to be a really powerful tool that is so simple and accessible to everybody, yet can have very profound effects on individual well-being and individual health, and as a result on collective well-being and collective health. Because when you have more resilient individuals, then you have again a more resilient population health-wise, and health-wise in the general sense, in terms of physical health, but also dealing with stress and mental health and all these kinds of things. Because again, another thing that we're seeing at the moment is not just people who are suffering with the virus itself, but we're seeing the knock-on effects of the various types of lockdown and shutdown and these kinds of things, and affecting people's mental health, particularly mental health across the board. And the longer it goes on, the more that will continue. So again, having practices like these helps in the moment of the crisis, but also you'd have a more resilient population, ready to face whatever emerges and whatever is thrown at us next as a population. So yeah, there's a lot of very interesting research being done around breath and breathing, and the physiology involved in the calming effect of breathing and the focusing effect of breathing, but also on just how it boosts the immune system, and the positive effects of strengthening the lungs. So there are many ways of breathing which actually physically strengthen the lungs, and if you have strong lungs, then your lungs are more resilient to respiratory infection. So I've been exploring that recently, in some of its different forms. There are many different forms, and one that I've found particularly helpful and particularly interesting, it's known colloquially as box breathing. And box breathing is in 4 stages. So there's an in-breath, an inhale, and a breath hold with the air in your lungs, and then an exhale, and then a breath hold with the breath out. So inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And box breathing has become more and more popular because it's a very powerful way of reducing anxiety, reducing the effects of stress, and it's been shown to affect cortisol levels in the body and stress hormone levels in the body. And so when your body is producing stress hormones, it's unable to produce other hormones. So by reducing those and activating the parasympathetic nervous system, your body is then able to produce healing hormones and restful hormones and calming hormones and that kind of thing. So the 2 systems can't operate at the same time. So that's essentially why breathing practices are so helpful, because they calm your body, they activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and then the physiological changes that happen in your body on a hormonal level have knock-on effects and consequences, positive consequences to your health. So box breathing, inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And each of those 4 stages is done for an equal amount of time. So it doesn't need to be seconds, but you just need to count and keep that count the same for each of the 4 stages. So a good number to start with, if you've not done this before, is a count of 4. If that's a bit difficult, try a count of 3. If 4 is quite easy, try a count of 5 or 6. And eventually, with practice, you can work your way up to 7, 8, 10. So I thought we'd give that a go together. It's something I've been doing a lot of recently, and a lot of is happening around the world, is people breathing together across the internet. So I thought we'd throw that in at the end here. So we'll just do 3 minutes, and I'll keep an eye on the time. Got timer up here. So it's a good idea to do it with your eyes closed as well, and your back straight, and really breathing in and out from the belly. So using your diaphragm. So as you're breathing in, your stomach is expanding. And when you're breathing out, your stomach is contracting. You don't really want to exercise the muscles too much, but you're just making sure. Many people have that movement the wrong way around. It's quite fascinating when I first discovered this, is that a lot of people, their stomach contracts when they breathe in and their stomach expands when they breathe out. And the number one thing you can do for your breath and for your health is to make sure that you expand on the in-breath and contract on the out-breath. And the more you can breathe from the bottom of your torso and expand your belly and contract your belly when you breathe, the better your life will be. And everything else is built from that starting point, from that foundation. So breathing in and expanding, breathing out and contracting. In, hold, exhale, hold. And begin when you're ready. And try and keep your back nice and straight, your head lifted. And on your next inhale, just breathing in and breathing out, gently allowing your breath to return to normal. And before you open your eyes, just notice if there's any change in your mental state, physical state, emotional state. Feel calmer, more focused, more relaxed, more energized perhaps. And the body can be quite amazing. It can kind of give you what you need in any moment. Just need to stop for a while and let it do its thing. So that's the end of everything that I had to offer this session. If anyone has any comments or any questions before we close, now's your chance. I'm going to stick my email in the chat in case anyone wants to get in touch. Otherwise, thank you for joining and wishing you a wonderful day or evening wherever you might be. And maybe I'll see some of you around over the rest of this unconference. Go well. Thank you.